Welcome back to the series, Decisive Days that shook the 2024 presidential election. In this video, we'll step back a bit and we'll talk about President Joe Biden's journey to becoming the President of the United States. It had been a long and arduous process, but it was pretty interesting. He graduated from the University of Delaware in 1965 and then earned a law degree from Syracuse University in 1968. He was elected to the Newcastle County Council in 1970, and just 2 years later, the U.S. Senate. He was re-elected 6 times after that. When he was elected, he was a mere 29, and before he was sworn in at 30, he was one of the youngest senators in history. Tragically, he lost his first wife Nelia and his 13-month-old toddler Naomi in a car accident just before Christmas in 1972. Fast forward ahead, but tragedy always haunted President Biden. On May 30th, 2015, he lost his son Beau, who was a rising star in Democratic politics, who died of a glioblastoma brain tumor. These devastating losses have shaped, framed, and focused President Biden's life and career in Washington. And although he never lost a general election for the Senate, President Joe Biden failed to win the Democratic presidential nomination in 1984, 1988, and 2008. Bowing out of the 1988 presidential campaign was a particularly painful blow for Senator Joe Biden. Then the 44-year-old senator delivered inspiring speeches, and his youthful energy was moving to many, until it wasn't. In a nutshell, the problem was that many of his best lines were plagiarized. There were simmering doubts. There had been chatter from a case long ago at Syracuse Law School that he had plagiarized some material as a student. And Senator Biden already had a reputation for being, as Democratic pollster Jeff Garin put it, a candidate of style, not substance. Then Maureen Dowd's front-page New York Times column on September 18, 1987, blew the case wide open. She paired the soaring rhetoric of the UK's Labour leader Neil Kinnock in a campaign ad that was eerily similar to that of Joe Biden's words in a debate a month before.
Why am I the first Kinnock in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university? Why is Glenys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations to be able to get to university? Was it because all our predecessors were thick? Did they lack talent? Those people who could sing and play and recite and write poetry? Those people who could make wonderful, beautiful things with their hands. Those people who could dream dreams, see visions. But why didn't they get it? Was it because they were weak? Those people who could work 8 hours underground and then come up and play football? Weak? Those women who could survive 11 childbearings? Were they weak? Does anybody really think that they didn't get what we had because they didn't have the talent or the strength or the endurance or the commitment? Of course not. It was because there was no platform upon which they could stand.
And then, this is Democratic presidential candidate Senator Joe Biden at the Iowa State Fair in August 1987.
Us in the party. And I started thinking as I was coming over here, why is it that Joe Biden is the first in his family ever to go to a university? Why is it that my wife, who's sitting out there in the audience, is the first in her family to ever go to college? Is it because our fathers and mothers were not bright? Is it because I'm the first Biden in 1,000 generations to get a college and a graduate degree that I was smarter than the rest? Those same people who read poetry and wrote poetry and taught me how to sing verse? Is it because they didn't work hard? My ancestors who worked in the coal mines in northeast Pennsylvania and would come up after 12 hours and play football for 4 hours? No, it's not because they weren't as smart. It's not because they didn't work as hard. It's because they didn't have a platform upon which to stand.
There was that, and then there was this.
The condition of our society. It cannot measure the health of our children. the quality of our education, the joy of their play.
That the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play.
Senator Joe Biden was forced to stand down from the 1988 campaign. He admitted to being stupid and called his actions a mistake. Many politicos believed that Joe Biden's presidential ambitions were behind. But in 2008, presidential candidate Barack Obama chose Joe Biden to be his running mate. In his memoir, A Promised Land, Biden writes that on domestic issues, he was smart, practical, and did his homework. His experience in foreign policy was broad and deep. Obama details the qualities that led him to choose Biden as his running mate. They were both Democratic senators, but other than that, Obama writes, we couldn't have been more different. Obama was born in Hawaii and lived in Indonesia. The key ingredient for Obama was Biden's age and experience, which comes with it wisdom. By contrast, Obama was a relative newcomer. During Biden's brief presidential run in 2008, Obama writes, he had impressed me with his skill and discipline as a debater and his comfort on the national stage. In 2016, Vice President Biden officially decided not to run for president after his son Beau had died. However, in many respects, the decision wasn't entirely his. The Democratic Party's power brokers had already rallied behind Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to become president.
I want to congratulate Hillary Clinton on making history as the presumptive Democratic nominee for President of the United States. Look, I know how hard this job can be. That's why I know Hillary will be so good at it. In fact, I don't think there's ever been someone so qualified to hold this office.
She ended up losing the election to Donald Trump. After the Trump presidency in 2020, Biden's campaign for president struggled in the early primaries, finishing poorly in Iowa and New Hampshire, and there were growing concerns about his viability as a candidate. Biden needed a strong performance in South Carolina to revitalize his campaign. This is where Jim Clyburn's influence became crucial. As the House Majority Whip and highly respected figure within the Democratic Party, Clyburn's endorsement carried significant weight, particularly in South Carolina, where he is a political powerhouse.
I know Joe. We know Joe. But most importantly, Joe knows us.
Then former Vice President Biden made a pivotal promise during a February 2020 debate, just days before competing in the South Carolina primary.
I'm looking forward to making sure there's a black woman on the Supreme Court to make sure we in fact get every representation. Not a joke. Not a joke.
What black voters represent a significant portion of the Democratic electorate. Clyburn's endorsement was seen as a turning point, galvanizing support among African American voters.
Just days ago, the press and the pundits had declared this candidacy dead. Now, thanks to all of you, the heart of the Democratic Party, we just won, and we've won big because of you.
This win reshaped the dynamics of the race, leading to a series of victories on Super Tuesday and ultimately securing Biden's position as the frontrunner for the Democratic nomination. President Biden's first term in office has been a success on many levels, including the American Rescue Plan in response to COVID-19, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the first major gun safety bill in decades, building semiconductors at home through the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and support for Ukraine's defense against a Russian invasion and boosting NATO. However, there were indications in his 2020 race that he was not going to be a two-term president. But later on, he did declare he was going to run in 2024. The 2024 presidential race began with a strong sense of duty and determination on Biden's part. Despite widespread concerns about his age and health, President Biden announced his re-election campaign with a promise of continuing the progress his administration had made in areas like infrastructure, healthcare, and climate change. His early campaign focused on unifying the country, restoring democratic norms, and building on his administration's legislative achievements. President Biden's decision was met with mixed reactions within his party. While many Democrats within the party supported him, polling showed that a vast majority of voters were worried about his age. Almost everyone appreciates his experience and leadership, But then again, a majority of Democrats expressed concerns about his age and potential challenges he may face in a rigorous campaign. Nevertheless, President Biden's early campaign efforts were marked by significant fundraising successes and endorsements from key party figures. However, as the campaign progressed, signs of trouble began to emerge. Biden's public appearances and speeches occasionally showed moments of fatigue and confusion.
I met with him right after being elected president right after I was sworn in, and we talked about this very issue. The fall, he had tied that fall, he decided to, look, I shouldn't get into this problem.
These moments, while not defining his entire campaign, started to chip away at the confidence of some Democratic voters and leaders. Notably, on June 4th, 2 weeks before the Biden and Trump debate, the Wall Street Journal published an article, "Behind Closed Doors, Biden Shows Signs of Slipping." The article said that he spoke so softly at times that some participants struggled to hear him, according to 5 people familiar with the meeting. He read from notes to make obvious points, paused for extended periods, and sometimes closed his eyes for so long that some in the room wondered whether he had tuned out. The article recalls that during the May 2023 debt ceiling negotiations between President Biden and former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, McCarthy told the Wall Street Journal that Biden's level of engagement was uneven. He would ramble, said McCarthy, who led the Republican side of the talks. He always had cards. He couldn't negotiate another way. McCarthy said that Biden would lose his train of thought and that he was going back to all the old stuff that had been done for a long time. He was just shocked when I'd say, "No, Mr. President, we talked about that meetings ago. We're done with that." Needless to say, blowback from the Democratic Party and influencers was fierce and severe. Joe Scarborough hammered the Wall Street Journal for their sloppy recording and complained that they had depended on the word of former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy.
Quoted in this article. Mike Johnson, people around Mike Johnson, and admit that this was basically House Republicans whacking.
Why didn't they just ask Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Well, exactly. Why did? Yeah, they could have.
And Lauren Boebert.
Yeah, it's really shocking, especially when you see what Kevin McCarthy has said repeatedly, publicly, and behind the scenes about Biden on those same days when they were negotiating.
Given what we saw during the debate, it turns out that, in retrospect, the Wall Street Journal may have gotten their story right.
We finally beat Medicare.
And this ends this first video. And in the next video, we're going to do a deep dive into the critical debate performance. Join me in the next episode.